everyone, welcome back to Creatively Crafted Life. It's that time of month again where Nikki from Nikki's Scrapbooking Adventure is joining me, and we're going to talk about all things crafty. And in this case, we're talking about mixed media, specifically sprays. Hi, Nikki.
Hello. So I'm excited to talk about sprays and how we can use them.
So are you an expert in using sprays? I'm throwing you out there.
You're not.
Do you own any sprays?
I own sprays because I've watched MK and Janet use their sprays, and I actually took a class with them, blank to bold, and they had us use some sprays. Not a fan.
No.
I will use them similar to my inks and spray a little bit on my mixed media mat and use it like watercolor.
Okay. So that's actually a really good point. It's one of the techniques you can definitely use is to treat it like watercolor, but it kind of feels like, what's the point then, right? Like, why not just use watercolor? So I totally get that. Well, I seem to love spray because prior to getting on this call, I said to Nikki, I think I have at least 50 bottles, and I probably have more because I have the distress oxide sprays and I have the distress regular sprays. So that's probably over 50 right then, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then I've got the Heidi Swap sprays, and I've got, what are these ones? Fashion Shimmer from Marabou sprays. And then I've got Dilution sprays, and I've got Irresistible sprays, and I've got, what is this? Reactive Mist spray. And then all the little ones from Studio Calico. Like, seriously, you guys, like, for someone who has so many sprays, I need to start using them. So hopefully we'll come up with some ideas, and maybe not so much from Nikki. She doesn't like them, but maybe from our users so I can start using them.
Right. Well, so those sprays, though, that you have, they all kind of have a different function, right? Like distress oxide and distress sprays all react with water. So if you add water to it, similar to the inks, they'll be reactive. But like your Delusion spray is more of a bold poppy color. Your Heidi Swap has shimmer in it, right?
Yep. That's how I ended up with so many, because, they're different. I must need them, right?
Right.
Even the shimmer sprays, like I ended up using like the gold. Like, do I really need all the different colors? And I think, if I had a do-over, I probably would be more selective in some of the additional items I purchase. I probably would still buy all of Tim's because I have full set syndrome issues, but the rest of them, I probably could have gotten away with sticking with like gold, silver, white, black, and have been quite happy with them. But I have used I have a few examples, so we'll go through that. We'll go through those. A lot of the common uses for sprays also were what we've probably talked about on your channel. Obviously, to make backgrounds is the most obvious. What am I trying to say? Obviously, make backgrounds is probably the most obvious idea and what most people are familiar with. And there's a few different techniques you can use to make the backgrounds. You can outright spray. You can do like the smooshing technique. Do you need the sprays to do the smooshing technique? No, you could use the ink pads. So there's a lot of overlap in mixed media as well, which I think if you are trying to break into that, realize that you don't need everything. Learn from me. Don't do what I do, and start off and see, and explore things as need be. So that was my public service announcement. Mm-hmm. Okay, so besides the backgrounds and different techniques that you could do, another common use I use it for is just to make splatters.
Yes.
Right. So here's an example where I've got gold splatters in a diagonal across. Very common. If you were to look through my albums, you would see that quite a lot. Although, to be honest, in probably the last couple of years, I haven't been doing that as much.
Yeah, I think that's probably more common for me as well. The reason I have sprays is because I watched those people on YouTube and I got FOMO. And then I found people were selling them super cheap at garage sales. Now I know why they're selling them super cheap, right? Because they didn't use them either. But that's why I have the collection I do. I've got about 20, probably a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
But I got them super cheap. If I were to start over again, I would get 4 colors: black, white, gold, and silver. And that's it.
Yeah. I think that's a good place to start. Now, don't get me wrong. It is fun to play with the other ones, but you have to know who you are, right? Like if you are someone that loves that mixed media messiness, well, more power to you. But if you're someone like me who it takes an effort to do that, to bring it out, to wait for things to dry, that kind of stuff, I think I'm in your camp. Those four colors would probably get you through most of what you're going to want to do in that kind of capacity.
Mm-hmm. And I might even, like, that's only 4 colors, right? I have room on my desk somewhere for 4 colors. I might pull them out and just set them on my desk for a little bit and play with them.
Yeah. And I think that's another part too, right? Is you have to build it into your process or your routine. And by having them front and center, you're more likely to do that. So I think I mentioned in your video that my plan is to focus on mixed media in March. So we'll see. We'll see how successful I am.
Bring out those sprays. So I've got one example, and we talked about backgrounds. One example where I think I use sprays. I'm not 100% sure because it's the smooshing technique. And you can see, boom, that is a background.
You went all out, didn't you?
I did. So I've got texture paste in white, which you could probably barely see. The black or the darker blue is a stamp, I think.
Stamp? Yeah,
and then
like
the blue back here is smooshing. So it is bam on the page. From what I've learned from this is that I need smaller sections of mixed media so they're still right on the page.
So less is more.
Yep.
Less is more. So now what's really cool though about this layout that maybe you can't appreciate because you're so close to it is it does look like a kid has gone and stepped in a mud puddle or a water thing and just gone. That's what it looks like. Which I think is fitting given that your son is playing in a pool, like in a little kiddie pool. So
yes.
So when I was thinking about this conversation we were going to have, one of my thoughts was to use mixed media intentionally. And one of those things is to convey more of the story, right? So in your case, it looks like water because that's what he was doing. So it fits with the theme of it. My example of one where I hope I achieved this is a sprayed background for a Disney castle photo at Christmas. And so really what I was trying to focus on was the sparkle and intensity of the castle in the sprays. And I used, you won't be able to see this on camera, but there's like shimmer spray and oxide, not oxide. I don't think I used oxide. I think it was regular distress and shimmer. There's a lot of sparkle.
There's a lot of sparkle. I love it. It makes your image pop so well. You mix the colors perfectly.
Well, I think because the photo is so dark, it also helps because the background is fairly light on top of it. So yeah, so try and be intentional, or at least that's kind of a way that you can approach it. A night sky, right? You can do something similar, but like on a black piece of cardstock with some shimmer and white. Let's say you're outside camping and you've got some great photos around the campfire or something like that. You could easily do a black background with a night sky, loosely interpreted, of course. It's not literal, but it gives that overall impression. So if you think that way, maybe it's easier to incorporate. I don't know. We'll see.
What else you got for us?
So the other thing I wanted to talk about was that you can apply sprays to cardstock. So this one here is on pattern paper. Now I did apply a layer of gesso on top of this before I used the sprays. Because this is not watercolor paper, you are going to get some buckling. I don't know if you can see that. Mm-hmm. So if that kind of texture bothers you, this is not this is not the solution for you. So I just applied a layer of gesso, which is kind of like white paint, if you want to think of it that way, and then put the sprays on top. And I combined colored sprays and like a gold shimmer. So mix and match, mix and match. And then this one, again, I don't know. I also applied, I don't know if you can see the texture down here at the bottom. That's because of the gesso that I applied first. Because this is just cardstock and then the sprays. And I also added some texture paste, these little lines are texture paste. And again, just to give it a background. And like you, it seems I like the shimmer. Because this one also has shimmer on it.
Well, okay, so you've mentioned gesso a couple of times. Let's kind of explain what gesso is, because it can kind of be confusing. Gesso is really a way for you to be able to have your ink settle on top of the paper instead of soak in. So once the gesso's dry, it allows you to kind of move your paper and have the ink or spray.
Yeah, it acts like a barrier between your cotton core paper or whatever, the paper pulp, and whatever media you're adding on top.
Yep. And I got this from Hobby Lobby. This is what my gesso looks like. I actually kind of freaked out and I bought way too many gessos because I wanted white, but I kept buying clear because I'm an idiot. I don't know what I was doing. I don't know. Did you use white or clear gesso on that?
I used white because that's what I have. I do have some clear gesso, I think from Ranger actually, which I think would be a good option if you were applying it, say, on colored cardstock, and then wanted to apply like dark stains or sprays on top of it. I think that would be a good solution because the white would look white.
Yes.
On a colored cardstock.
And people use the white as kind of like white paint. So they get, you know, a circle or whatever shape they want on their colored background. They use it like that. And then they add mixed media on top, or they just leave it like that. And it's acid free. So you don't have to worry about, well, you have to check the label, right? You don't have to worry about your picture fading. Whatever.
Right. And if you don't have gesso, again, I would just say if you've got some white acrylic paint, you know, just apply it really thinly on your layout and it will act in a very similar manner. Just keep in mind that anytime you add another layer, you're probably going to get some texture from that unless you're an expert at applying it cleanly and smoothly.
And that's hard. I've seen people use credit cards and palette knives and I always end up with a line. I don't know what it is. It's like there's a line every single time.
Yeah, me too. And if you use a brush, you're going to get some sort of brush strokes in there. So just embrace it for what it is, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Or if you have any tips and tricks, leave them down in the comments because we would love to know.
Absolutely. Another thing that I thought or that I like to use sprays for, and I have used sprays, is to color things that I don't feel like coloring. So let's say I have a die cut and I don't want to color it. I will spray it. And actually, let me go grab something. I totally forgot about this. I will be right back. Okay, so not so much scrapbooking related, but I made these little cactus and they are sprayed with oxide sprays. So I don't know how well you can see the texture, but even the flower and stuff is all done with sprays because I didn't want to have to color these. You see the little cactus?
They're cute.
This one's a little bit better.
Okay. So did you put it together and then spray it, or did you spray the individual pieces and then put it together?
I sprayed the individual pieces first and then put it together so that you got the variation in them. Because I think it just looks a little bit more authentic. These guys are maybe not quite as cute as the other ones because these are actually proportionately should be really big compared to these ones. But I'm pretty impressed with how this one turned out.
It's cute. On your paper, like I can't tell in the video, but is it kind of speckled, you know, like spray kind of speckles?
Yeah, let me see if I can like flatten it out. Is that better? Can you see?
It looks like colored cardstock to me, so that's crazy.
Yeah, it's totally watercolored sprayed, like it's got texture as opposed to like a flat piece of cardstock. It also, because I used oxide, it's got that chalky feel to it, which, you know, sometimes plants can get that kind of white film on them or whatever. So I thought it was real authentic.
The only plants she has in her house are paper.
Pretty much. Pretty much. So another example of a place or an opportunity where I could use sprays to like mass color things was I did a challenge, was it last year or maybe the year before, to try and use up some of what I call my naked chipboard. So way back in the day, you could get a lot of chipboard that just was brown, craft colored. And the idea was, of course, look at all the opportunities you can have. You can paint it, you could do whatever. Yeah, it's a pain in the butt, in my opinion. And I ended up not using it as a result. So the challenge was to use that up. And so what I did was I actually glued all the alphabets down on a piece of cardstock. Now this is watercolor cardstock. And then I just sprayed the whole background. And when I put the letters in strategically, I spelled the word out, sweet baby, which I then colored in paint afterwards to make it pop.
Cool. I love that layout.
Yeah, it's fun, right? Look at the backside.
So are those all the colors that you used on the front? Like you cannot see that yellow.
Well, because you know how oxide sprays are?
Yeah.
Because this was done with oxide. You know how it's got all those different pigment colors in there? And depending on the you know how much water you add and stuff, it breaks out. But yeah, that's what that is. And then I had so much fun with that. I thought, let me do another one. So this one I did like an ombre, and these are all those chipboard pieces again, just glued down and then sprayed on top.
Totally inspired. That is so cool. I love that.
And then because, you know, we're really into the mixed media, these are, what are those things called? The foil flakes.
Oh, Lord have mercy. They're foil flakes. That's what they're called.
Is that what they're called? Okay. For some reason, I thought they were called something else. But yeah, so I thought we'll use some of that as well, just to kind of jazz up the background.
Did you adhere the foil flakes? I do not have any luck.
Oh, I think I just used some matte medium.
Okay.
Yeah, I just, because I can see the paint, like where I took a brush. So I just sprayed it, laid it down, and then tapped it in. And that's it. And then buffed it when it was dry.
Oh, that's the key. You need to buff it after it dries. I try to buff while it's wet and it does not work.
No, you gotta wait till it's dry or you're gonna peel everything up or it's gonna smear all over the place.
Yeah, it's a hot mess. That's why I was like, don't, yeah. I got some from Dollar Tree because I was like, I've never done this before. Let's try it. Never again.
I've seen people use more like a tacky glue as well. So like think like Eileen's tacky glue or Scott's quick dry, something that's got a lot of tack to it, and just be sure not to do it too globby. Almost like paint it on or sponge it on like with a sponge and then apply it. That seems to work okay.
We'll see if I try it. I probably won't.
Do you
it's
still
like
have
glitter.
it?
It's like glitter. It gets everywhere.
Well, and it expands. So it comes in this cute little container and you open it and it just goes.
Yep.
And then I'm like, now what?
Yep. And the one from Dollar Tree kind of clumped too. So like I had massive clumps of foil and I was like, that's a lot of foil in a little clump. Like, what is going on?
It probably would, like I would probably still just stick it down, and then when you buff it afterwards, it probably would just flake off. Okay, so other things that you can do with sprays. So I'm thinking along the lines of watercolor. There are some watercolor techniques that would be interesting to see how they respond or work with sprays. So one of them is to apply salt. Have you heard of that one before?
Oh yeah. Yep. And it like resists the watercolor, right?
It picks it up, right? And so then when you flake the salt off afterwards, you get a cool textured background. So I don't know why it wouldn't work with ink, other than possibly ink is a little more intense than watercolor, so you may not get quite the variation, but that would be interesting to try. Another one that I've seen people try with watercolors is they take plastic wrap and they kind of like lay it down over top of their wet watercolor and they scrunch it up. and then wait till it dries and then peel it off. And then you get this really cool kind of distressed background. So I thought that might be kind of fun to try.
Sorry, I think you'd have to use gesso underneath.
Yeah, or use watercolor paper. So not Ranger. Who was it? Prima, maybe. One of the manufacturers put out a 12 by 12 watercolor pad. That's what this is on. Like this is watercolor paper. Yeah.
I need to look into this.
Yeah, I can't remember which one it is, but there is a 12 by 12 watercolor pad on there. Oh, I didn't show you the back of this one. Look, isn't that cool?
That's fun. That's almost funny. You can put another photo on it.
Yeah, isn't it funny how sometimes the back is almost better than the front? Okay.
No, I still like the front better.
Another squirrel moment. But yeah, so I can't remember which manufacturer it is, but it's one of them. I'm sure if you go to scrapbook.com and type in 12 by 12 watercolor paper, you'll find it. Is it the best? Is it equivalent to Arches? I highly doubt it, but it gets the job done. So
watercolor paper in my mind has a texture, while Vicki Boutin's foundation paper is very smooth and it's just hecka thick, really, really thick.
Right. Does it hold up to water?
Yeah, the point of the foundations paper is to use it with mixed media.
Okay. So this does have texture. Like this is legit watercolor paper. Like you can see, well, I don't know if you can see it, but you can see that it's got that kind of dimpled look that watercolor paper has.
I think your layout with watercolor paper though is flatter, and I don't know if it's because it's been in your album than some of the things on Vicki Boutin. I think this is on Vicki Boutin foundations paper, I think, because I used a lot of water. So it did bow.
Yeah.
It's been in a album for quite some time.
Anytime you add water to paper, you're going to get some bowing. I mean, unless you have like a super high quality and you stretch it, like watercolorists do, they stretch their paper and let it dry and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Whoa, I did not know that.
Well, they stretch it. It's like they tape it down, right?
Yeah.
And you're supposed to like put water on it first, right? And I think you're supposed to. No. Again, I am not an artist, you guys. So if I've got this wrong, please correct me. But my understanding is they tape it down, they apply water, they let it dry, and that kind of does its thing. And then they go in and they do their painting afterwards.
Okay.
But I may have made that up. But I don't think I did.
So one technique in that blank to bold class was to cover, foam board in packing tape. So then it's like a slick surface. Then you tape your 12 by 12 paper down. The problem with that technique though is that then you have a little white border. You can cut it off and frame your layout or whatever, but by letting your layout dry on that foam board, it's a little bit flatter.
Yeah, and I guess if your page is only 12 by 12 and you want it to be the full page, you wouldn't want that border. But nothing to say that you can't cut it off and put another piece of cardstock behind it or something. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to talk about was ways that you could do more techniques for your background. So I think you talked about in your video that when you applied paste, it kind of acted like a resist. So there's a few other ways that you could apply resist on your background if you want. So one is that you can stamp and emboss. So when you add that embossing powder on, it will also act as a resist. So if you want to have some cool kind of backgrounds, you could try that. If you don't like the glossy look of embossing powder, afterwards, you can iron it off. So use it as,
What? I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, so you basically would stamp, emboss, do your background, wait till everything's dry, then take some like printer paper and apply it on top and take like an iron and just go over top, and it will basically lift the embossing powder off onto the computer paper. Yeah, and then you have a matte finish if you don't want that shiny look.
You can also use an iron to try to flatten out your pages. I've tried it. It works okay. Like it gets the big wrinkles out, but your page is still going to be warped.
Right. Right. You just have to embrace it. I think that's a lot with mixed media is you just have to embrace the process. Like it is what it is. Happy accidents, whatever you want to call them, um, they will be what they will be. The other thing to try, now I've done this when I made cards, and I don't see why it wouldn't work for this, but if you use freezer paper, you can die cut out shapes with the freezer paper and iron it to your paper, and that will then resist as well. So freezer paper has a plastic coating on it. So you take the freezer paper, you put the plastic coating against your against your layout, right? You iron it on, then do your background, and then the freezer paper will peel off afterwards. I've blown Nikki's mind, I think.
I don't know what freezer paper is. What is freezer paper? Is it wax paper? Is it
No,
something
it's called
different?
freezer paper. Let me go pull it.
Okay, because I've never seen this.
So called freezer paper. Comes in a big roll. It's white, right? So this side is just matte, but this side is plastic coated.
Okay.
And the idea is that when you wrap your meat or whatever it is you want to put in the freezer, is it acts as a barrier, and so then you don't get freezer burn and stuff as easily on your frozen products. But this cuts like a dream with a die cut machine.
Right, because it's thin.
And because it's thin, and the plastic is very thin. Like it, sometimes cutting plastic can be problematic. This is really easy. So I've actually used this to do a quote, like an 11 by 14 quote, where I die cut all the letters out, which you could use your Cricut or Silhouette or whatever. Put it on a piece of watercolor paper, ironed it on, and then just did like a whole smooshing spray background on it. And then once it dried, I just went and peeled all the letters up, and you could see the quote behind it.
That sounds like a pain in the butt.
Well, it was one time that I did that. So
like doing an entire quote on your page, like that seems like a
well, that was an art piece. That was an art piece for a special person. But I'm thinking more along the lines of cut out a bunch of circles, take a punch, cut out a bunch of circles, glue them on. They could look like bubbles or something. You know what I mean? Do your background really light, take them off, and then do a light spray over top. So your bubbles now look lighter than the background. I think it could look really cool, especially if you've got like aquarium photos or something like that.
Yeah.
Mixed media is going to be work. I think that's partly why I don't do it a lot, right? Like it's extra steps.
It is so, and you have to wait for it to dry.
Right.
And I always, for whatever reason, stick my finger in it, or like I bump it, or something happens where it's not dry yet. Like that's why I don't use Nuvo anymore. I don't use those little Nuvo drops because I always inevitably smear one.
Right. So you have to be like what's the right word? You have to have a drying rack or a drying station or something like that, I think, to be successful.
Yeah. Or I just stack it on other things that are really high up and not touch it.
Exactly. One last idea that I had was that you can use it to dye materials. So for instance, if you have like a white ribbon or something like that, you can use it to dye that. Or, if you've got any type of fabric, bias tape, that kind of thing.
I do have an example of that. Hang on. Okay, so I have an example of where you color I can't get it out of the page protector, sorry. But this is, what is this called? Muslin cloth? No.
Cheesecloth?
Cheesecloth, yeah. So this is called cheesecloth. And I used black Distress Oxide ink spray on it to color it.
Very cool.
And then put it on my layout. Sorry, there's a glare.
Yeah. Very cool.
It's fun.
Yeah, it is. Again, just trying to think about different textures and different ideas of getting things on your page is really, I think, at the end of the day, what the goal of mixed media is, right? Is to have all these really fun and cool elements that end up making this page a little bit special.
Okay, this is a squirrel moment. I'm going through my October daily album, and I had a moment where I wanted to use all of the buttons. Now, I still have a huge jar of buttons. Have I shown you this paper before?
No, I haven't seen this.
This is hilarious. I glued all of these buttons on acetate.
Wow. That looks awesome. I love that idea. It must be heavy though.
Oh, it's so heavy and the buttons keep popping off. I just think it's hilarious. And my brain said, Nikki, you have to do this.
Yeah.
So I did it.
I love that. I love that. I think that's fantastic. How did you attach the buttons? Just with glue dots?
I used our glitter glue, and I think that's part of the reason why they're popping off a little bit.
Right. I was going to say either that or some type of super glue you may have to use. I've had a lot of success with this fabric tack. Have you heard of that?
Is that 3-in-1? Oh no, it's fabric tack. Okay, it's by the same company.
It's the same thing. As far as I'm aware, it's the same thing. It feels like the same thing. But I've had a lot of
3-in-1.
Yeah, it's a silicone-based glue. I've had a lot of success with this holding on to stuff. Maybe try that too.
Yeah.
I don't know how it would look on the back end though, like on the other side of your page.
Yeah, and the art glitter glue dries clear. So,
right.
But I think super glue dries clear too. I don't know. I have to.
Yeah.
We'll see. If they keep popping off, then maybe I'll switch glues. But for right now, only one is popped off. That's not bad.
Well, there you go. So seeing as we're on this squirrel moment of things popping off, have you ever gone through your old albums and found that stuff has dropped off or yeah. How do you handle it? Do you fix it right then and there or do you ignore it?
Ignore it. Well, part of the reason why I ignore it is because the only time that I really go through the albums is if I'm showing somebody else. And so like at that point, I'm not going to go back and fix it. But I have learned through my process now, I try to add a little bit of glue to everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still a little bit, what is the right word? Not so great about applying glue to everything. When I was pulling these pages out, I saw a few pages that had a few little things that have slipped and slid all over the page. And I'm like, oh man. So
you can't trust those dang stickers. Those stickers get you every time. They never stay sticky the whole time.
Yeah, and so there's a couple things that I've had failures with is definitely the chipboard before I clued in that the chipboard, the self-adhesive chipboard needed to have extra glue. For sure that. And then some of the we used to call them photo splits back in the day. They were how we mounted everything. There's the little square pieces of tape. And I've had some of those that have released, which is disappointing because the whole marketing behind that was the longevity of this adhesive. So I was like, I think at the end of the day, liquid glue still seems to be a little bit better. Is that, I don't know.
And I mean, I only put a little itty bitty dot, hardly anything. But at least there's a dot there so that if it's like swinging, it's still on the
Well, it's like a backup plan, right?
Right.
So I think that is all that I had as far as thoughts go for using sprays. As you can tell, I need some new ideas. So for those of you that are listening, please leave your ideas below because in the month of March, I really do want to explore playing with mixed media. I'm keeping it wide open. I'm hoping to explore as much of the different supplies I have in my space as possible. We'll see what happens. I'm excited about it. I think if I can build it into my work process somehow that I'm going to use it more, but I think I need to give it a good, what do they say? The good old college try to, get it in there. What about you, Nikki? Are you still going to pursue mixed media? Or are you kind of just being like, nah, you know what? I don't think it's really my thing.
Certain mixed media, yes. I probably will put my sprays, like I talked about, those 4 on my desk because I want to add some splatters. I am feeling in a chaos era. So what I mean by that is earlier this month, I did a layout and it just looks like chaos in my brain because it's patterned paper on the background.
Wow.
Like this is chaos to me.
You're
very
living
multicolor.
dangerously.
I am. Instead of white background, it's why is there a thumbs up on your face? It's really weird.
It's doing that again, right? Like, remember how we did that?
I don't know.
I don't know what triggered it. What did we say?
I don't know. Okay. But anyway, it's not just a regular white pattern or white background, I used a pattern paper with multicolor. So I just feel like this is a little bit of chaos, and maybe I could add a little bit more chaos by adding some sprays and mixed media.
Cool. I love that. I love that you're branching out. I think it's good to try different things that are outside our comfort zone every now and then.
I agree.
So hopefully the viewers will join us in maybe pushing our boundaries in the next little bit. Stay tuned. Be sure to like and subscribe this video if you enjoy this content. And be sure to head over to Nikki's channel. The link is in the description below in case you missed it. And until next time, happy crafting.